Good afternoon. Thank you again for attending the ABCs of Safety Auditing webinar, Automate, Build, and Control, which is co-sponsored by the National Association of Safety Professionals, or NASP, and Privity EHS Software. My name is Dan Gutman, and I'm with Business Management Solutions, which is a management consulting firm. We're gratified by the tremendous interest in our program, as is evidenced by the number of participants. We have an eclectic group of attendees today consisting of consultants, OSHA trainers, and EHS managers and executives. Our goal is that everyone take away a few key concepts, or at least a new take on the nature and best practices of auditing, and how to automate the auditing process to save time and money for your own company or for your clients. The first part of the webinar, for about 20 minutes, will be conducted by Eric Gislinson, who is the Executive Director of NASP, one of the premier professional safety associations in the USA. Among other distinctions, NASP has several professional safety certification programs that are recognized as some of the best in the industry, the highest being the Licensed Safety Professional, or LSP. Their online and classroom EHS courses have been taken by professionals throughout the USA for many years, and they have a new auditing course which will be conducted from February 18th to the 20th. If you're interested, please contact NASP ASAP for details and availability. This will be followed by a 20-minute presentation by Eitan Shibi on how to best automate the auditing process. Now, once you've determined what you need to audit and the auditing components, you can manage the whole process using the ubiquitous smartphones we all have, as well as checklists, which is better, faster, and cheaper than the alternatives. Eitan is the CEO of Privity, which arguably has the best EHS software platform in the world from a price-performance perspective. Privity is both simple and elegant, and it was started about 20 years ago in 1999, so arguably they are the Methuselah of EHS software platforms. Privity has NASA, Kraft Foods, and Foxwoods Casinos as clients, among many others, large and small. Now, to keep everyone engaged during the webinar, we'll poll everyone on a few issues, so please answer them when the questions pop up. The last 15 minutes or so we'll allocate to questions or comments from our participants. Since we have many participants, it will be more practical to ask you to submit your questions in writing all along as you think them, which you can do easily on the webinar through both presentations. We'll pick a representative sampling of your queries to answer at the end, and if your question was not chosen, don't despair. We'll be happy to answer it privately after the webinar. And now I'm pleased to introduce Eric Gislinson of NASP to start the presentation. Eric, the podium's yours.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that. Good afternoon to all the attendees. Again, my name is Eric Gislinson. I'm the Executive Director at NASP, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with everyone. It's good timing for this webinar, considering we're starting fresh after the holidays. Hopefully, everybody had a relaxing holiday season, and now we're rolling into 2020, the new year. There are some pros and cons to doing an audit just annually, and we'll talk about that as we get into the slide presentation. But generally speaking, we should definitely be doing audits at the beginning and the end of the year minimally. So let's talk about the importance of auditing. Now, this may seem elementary to you, but one of the integral parts of any safety management system is the audit aspect of it. Guys, I don't know how many of you folks have implemented safety management systems at your facilities, but if you haven't, it's definitely something you need to look into. And I don't care if it's the ISO 45001, OSAS 18001, you're in California, the I2P2, the Illness Injury Prevention Program, ANSI Z10 has their version of it. There's lots of different safety management systems out there. The bottom line is that the audits verify that your safety program is reducing incidents. It really goes above and beyond the scope of this webinar to talk about safety management systems, but I just want to bring the 6 elements into focus and see how auditing ties into it. So the 6 elements of a safety management system are management commitment, employee involvement, hazard identification, corrective action, training and education, and finally, program evaluation. That's where the auditing structure comes into it. So our goal from an auditing perspective really is to create accountability through the organization. Hey, are your supervisors doing what they say they're doing as it pertains to safety? Are they doing their weekly inspections? Is management really committed? Have they allocated the resources? Have they funded what they need to fund to get things they need to get pushed through from a safety standpoint? So an audit provides that feedback, which can improve your safety management system, reduce potential losses, and finally improve the company's safety performance. You know, really gone are the days of simple OSHA compliance. The whole concept of a safety management system and the auditing structure is really continuous improvement. If we can continually improve, reducing injuries, reducing illnesses, reducing first aids, reducing near misses, that's the goal of a safety audit system as it pertains to safety management. Now, before I get to this next slide, I would like to do an introductory poll just to see if we're awake after lunch. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, I want to really see what you guys have in place from the audit perspective. So we're going to bring up a quick poll question, and let's see if you guys are, what kind of auditing you're doing. So if you'll click on one of those, and then we'll push forward. All right. So it looks like a lot of you guys are doing hazard and risk assessments. About a third of you are doing management system audits. So let's go to the next slide with the importance of auditing. So this is the crux of the webinar itself, the automation aspect of it. You know, a properly designed safety program allows you to streamline your process, okay? We'll get into this as we progress through it, but building an auditing program provides important information. We automate, we build, the safety audit provides important information on risk behaviors and conditions in the workplace. You know, it is interesting to me, and you guys, I may be preaching to the choir on this, but statistically, we could have a 100% safe work environment from the conditions, right? Everything looks good from the conditions, but we would typically still have 80% of our injuries. So why is that? Well, unfortunately, people tend to indulge in at-risk behaviors. And there's a lot of reasons why people do that. Is it complacency? Is it fatigue? Is it distraction? Is it frustration? Okay, an audit will help us put into perspective why these injuries are occurring. And then look at the control bullet point. Ultimately, we need control. We need to control issues that we see from the audits, meaning corrective actions. Folks, if you're doing an audit and you're not providing corrective actions stemming from that safety audit, well, then your audit's useless, okay? So we're gonna look at automating, building, and controlling these safety audits. So why are they performed? Well, obviously there's legislative requirements, right? OSHA has specific standards that require auditing, like lockout tagout, for example, process safety management, emergency action plans. OSHA doesn't really refer to them as audits in some of the regulations. They typically call them program evaluations. It's really the same thing. It's making a determination whether or not your program is effective. These are obviously helpful from a safety concern, right? We want to make sure we're eliminating or minimizing safety issues, we're reducing injuries. And the bottom line with these audits is that we are contributing to a vibrant safety culture. Now, I will say what a safety audit isn't. And Praviti is going to talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. But a safety audit is not necessarily an inspection. So a lot of times we use those terms interchangeably. And an inspection is actually typically on a piece of equipment or a process. A safety audit is actually a system audit. So you're auditing whether or not your inspections are effective. You're auditing whether or not your inspections are doing what they need to be doing. So you're auditing your inspections. An audit is really more of a 30,000 foot view versus the specifics on a particular piece of equipment or a particular item. So why do we conduct these safety audits? Well, we talked about it a little bit already. This is elementary stuff, folks. The reason we do a safety audit is basically to determine whether our programs and our procedures are working. Are they being followed by employees? Are they being followed by management? Are people engaged in the safety programs? We also want to verify that processes are being followed by both, the company policy perspective, procedures, OSHA regulations, and those types of things. Is it really happening in the workplace? I always joke, it's great to have a program that sits on a shelf and collects dust, but it's another thing as to whether those policies and procedures are actually being implemented in the workplace. One thing that everybody should be aware of, the kind of the ABCs of the hierarchy of controls, all right? Everybody should be familiar with that. You look at from an OSHA perspective, OSHA wants you to either eliminate, substitute, or engineer out the hazard. If you can't do that, then you have to administratively control it. And then finally, our last resort is personal protective equipment. An audit will look at those control measures and make a determination if we've got the management controls in place and are they really effective. So how do we build a safety audit team? An audit really is only good as the professionals who are doing it. I am a big believer in doing internal audits. Now, I get it. Sometimes you have to have outside consultants, especially if you're doing ISO audits. Those management systems, you have to have an external auditor who comes in, reviews your plans and programs, walks the plant. But a lot of this you can do in-house. The problem that I typically see is that your team doesn't always have the KSAs, right? Knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform the audit. It's very important because if they don't know what they're looking for and they don't know the goal of an audit, well, then basically we're wasting our time as a team. What do we look for from the safety audit team? It's really best to have a small team. We're talking 3 to 5 employees, not unlike incident command structure where you have 3 to 5, maybe 7 at the most to handle a certain situation. Okay. You should have management and hourly employees on the team. The people who are intimately familiar in the process, like your hourly employees, they definitely need to be involved. And then you have to have management employees who have the ability to make changes, do the things they need to make the corrective actions. Now, everybody on the team should be familiar with OSHA laws, regulations, consensus standards like ANSI and NFPA. They have to have proper training. I'll give you a good example of one of the teams I met with. This was several years ago. I went to meet the audit team, and there was 30 people in the meeting. 30 people that had never been trained, had no idea, but they were safety committee members, and they were chosen to be picked for the audit team. It was a waste of time. It was a waste of time. So what we did was we broke those 30 people up into groups of 3 to 5 people, and then we picked specific systems for them to audit. In other words, I took one group and I said, you're going to focus on ergonomic hazards. This group's going to focus on slip, trip, fall hazards. This group's going to look at proper signage throughout the facility. And that's the kind of things that we did. So you break these teams out into the specific areas and have training on those individual systems so they're specific to that item. You train your team to observe violations and hazard identification. They need to be able to see what they're looking for. Generally speaking, folks, you never have anybody inspect their own work environment. We know why, right? Oftentimes, you look at that system day in, day out. We tend to overlook some of the hazards that we really don't even feel are apparent because we've seen it all the time, and we basically become desensitized. It's always good to have a second set of eyes on those particular areas. You know, this is an interesting slide. From a regularity standpoint, you know, conducting an annual safety audit can kind of have unintended consequences. It's a strange concept because, again, we started out by saying that the beginning of the year is a good time to do this, but sometimes we have a problem with that because we look at it from the perspective of, all right, it's time for an audit, so we're going to get our act together. We rush out into the workplace. We start cleaning things up. We start fixing things because we know if they're external auditors, they're going to come in and clean our clock with violations and things like that. So we ramp up our compliance efforts. I'm guilty of it. I've done it. I've been in that industry that does it. That's not a safety culture we want to be a part of. Our safety culture's continuous improvement, like we said, and we look at safety not as a priority, okay? We look at safety as a value. I really want you guys to think about that. We hear a lot of people say, hey, safety is the #1 priority, but really safety should be a value because priorities change, folks, okay? Value is something consistent with quality, production, the other elements, basically all the pillars of an effective workplace. So a better idea might be consistent regularity, okay? So we schedule specific audits throughout an 11-month period. Maybe we pick a particular item and we audit that item. For example, like earlier I said, ergonomics or slip, trip, falls, or fall protection, or emergency response. And then at the end of the year, we do a final comprehensive safety audit. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. One more anecdotal story with one of my clients that was in the automotive industry. At the end of the year, we had a lot of leaking equipment, lots of hydraulic fluid issues, things like that leaking from the equipment. Before the audit, we'd go in, clean up the equipment. We didn't fix it. They'd clean it up and repaint it. The audits always came back good. The equipment looked great, but the equipment would just begin leaking again. And we'd actually have additional slip, trip, fall hazards after that because of the new slick paint, okay? I mean, for lack of a better term, you can't put lipstick on a pig. You need to think about that from a perspective of fixing things versus covering things up just to make the audit look good. So how do we prep? How do we prep for the audit? Well, obviously we want to alert management. We want to get our records in place at least a week prior to it. And then we're going to review past program audits, okay? I know that may sound silly to audit your audit. That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about auditing and looking at issues or for issues from the previous audit. Did they get fixed? How many times have you gone to a previous audit and it's like, oh my gosh, we didn't get that done, okay? Has a corrective action plan been implemented? And then you review company, local, state, federal requirements. Have there been changes in the standards? Do you fall under the new silica requirements for increased monitoring and vacuum systems? And then finally, we determine the scope of the audit. Are we focused on one particular system? Now, this is an important slide. And again, I tend to be guilty of it on some of the teams I've been on in the past. An audit should be a fact-finding mission. It's just to gather information. We're not looking to form an opinion or make an evaluative comment during the phase. We're not looking at pointing fingers and placing blame. It's not fault finding, it's fact finding. And I see that a lot during accident incident investigation. Why would you do something like that? I can't believe you did something like that. That's not what an audit's about. Okay. Second, we make assignments to define the areas of the inspection. And again, you must have the proper background information documents. They all have to be elements in place to do an effective audit. All right. So What do we audit? Well, think about it. Employee knowledge, written program review, program administration, record and document review, equipment and material, and finally a general area walkthrough. I want to break these down individually and kind of see the best way to do this and how we would do it. So let's start with employee knowledge. So employee knowledge really depends on what they do, right? It's going to be specific to their activities. Maybe their duties are different, their responsibilities are different. Generally speaking, management should have a higher level of knowledge and skills than the general employees. Maybe not on a piece of equipment that employee would have intimate knowledge. Let's take an example of, say, lockout tagout. Okay, so lockout tagout, if somebody's not performing it, right, they're an affected employee, they don't need to have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to actually turn off a piece of equipment and place a lock on it. However, if the person's authorized, right, they very well should have that information available to them to perform it effectively. So how do we determine employee knowledge? Well, we look at tests that they've taken in the past. Did they pass them? Did they not pass them? Did they struggle? We interview them. We ask informal questions. Folks, part of your audit should be watching your employees on the work area, doing what they're doing, watching their daily activities, and documenting their behaviors. That's a big part of an audit. Now let's look at written program review. So we have to look at the programs that apply to the specific portion of the audit. You know, do you have to look at your lockout tagout program when you audit? Absolutely. We may be changing things in that program based on our audit findings. Then we're going to compare that to the hazard identification, control, employee training, record keeping, and make sure that they're meeting regulatory requirements. We're going to see if what they're doing matches to what we say we're doing. And again, I'll tell you, a good resource, if you're not using your company's insurance carrier, your workers' comp carriers, they can help you with some of these audits. They are a great resource, and you need to tap into that. I mean, you think about it from the perspective of these companies, they want to save you money because they don't want to pay out in claims, and we don't want to pay out in extra premiums. So use your insurance companies. They do a great job and provide a second set of eyes. Now let's look at program administration. Is there a person assigned to manage the program? Okay, folks, that can't be you on every element of a safety program. I've been in those types of facilities where it's all rests on me. I'm the EHS manager. I have to do it all. You have to be the person that's actually delegating authority. You delegate to other individuals within the structure, okay? But our specific duties and responsibilities assigned. Is there an effective employee training program? Are sufficient assets provided? I've seen it from an emergency response perspective. I've been to companies, more than one. I look at their emergency response program and they say, okay, well, we're going to have the plant manager be the incident commander if there's an emergency response to a spill or leak of a hazmat. That plant manager has had no training, no accountability. Do you think there's maybe a minor conflict of interest? Okay, so this person doesn't have any the wherewithal on how to operate within that structure. That's a real issue. Okay, so we need to have accountability, and that's one of the things that an audit will review. What about record and document review? You guys know very well as safety folks, if it's not written down from an OSHA perspective, it didn't happen. So exhaustive records are a requirement and objective of your safety audits. Your audit team should consult on past incident reports. Why? Well, they're looking at incident reports and they're trying to develop trends. So the audit should be looking at, for example, why are we having incidents on second shift with new employees on a particular piece of equipment? That's a red flag. So you're trying to identify a trend and analyze why these situations are happening. And then the audit team strives for comprehensive reporting. I do recall another situation a few years back. I was on the receiving end of the audit. Okay, this was an ISO 14001, an environmental audit. And we were walking through the baghouse scrubber area. These are dust collection systems. It's Tuesday afternoon. They're looking at the daily inspection sheet of the scrubber. They said, hey, this is interesting. It looks like your employees can tell the future. And I shrugged. I was like, I don't know what you mean. And she said, well, it's Tuesday and they filled out your daily inspection all the way through Friday saying everything looks great, thumbs up. Oh my gosh. You talk about being embarrassed, humiliated. I can laugh about it now, but pencil whipping, as we know employees are inclined to do, uh, folks, that's falsification of documentation. And in that situation, it was a major nonconformist for us from an ISO situation, and we almost lost our ISO certification. So you keep that in mind when we're doing record keeping and document review. Okay. What about equipment and material? Hey, is your equipment in safe condition? Have the guards been checked? Are energy isolation devices adequate? Have you checked your exits thoroughly? Is there adequate equipment to conduct the task safely? Do they have proper tools and supplies? Or are your maintenance people using cheater bars to attach to their wrenches? Are they making homemade rigged up tools to do the job? Big red flag again. What about PPE? Is it being stored properly? Oh gosh, I see this a lot when I go in an audit. You got your respirators sitting on a 55-gallon drum of hazmat, respirators not stored properly, fall protection, laying in the bottom of a scissor lift. Folks, that's not conducive to a safety culture, and it's definitely putting your employees at risk. And then you look at things like exits and emergency lights and fire extinguishers. You know, my motto is a locked exit is as bad as a blocked exit. So an emergency situation, a means of egress is very, very important. Get your fire marshal involved. Get other people involved who are looking at it from a fire perspective. You've probably heard on the news there's been a rash of fires lately in the Texas area. Very, very big concern during an audit. And then finally, a general walkthrough. Now, safety audit's not designed for a comprehensive wall-to-wall inspection. You really should be doing that on a monthly basis. Your end of the year or your beginning of the year walkthrough provides insight into the effectiveness of what you've been doing throughout the year, right? So I can't emphasize that enough. We see what people are doing. We make a determination of whether or not they're following the rules of our safety program, okay? And then we document that in our audits. So audits should be noting unsafe acts, unsafe behaviors, unsafe conditions, and then we place that into our records. So we build our report from our findings. We make a nice, concise report that details all the areas of the program, and then we reach a conclusion. Hey, are we doing a good job on our training? Are we deficient in areas? Do we provide positive feedback? Okay, positive feedback, folks, is important in an audit. We don't want to focus on negative reinforcement. You did this wrong, you did this is bad, you're a bad employee, right? You want to tell people what they're doing right. Empowering your employees goes a long way. I've dealt with it firsthand. It really adds to the safety culture while doing your audits. Let's talk about recommendations. So you have to develop a recommended action plan. Now, we don't want to look at making more rules, paperwork, or tasks more difficult. We want to avoid that if all possible. What we're actually trying to do is possibly simplify it. Again, I've been doing audits for many, many years, and a lot of times I see that companies are requiring too many inspections. You know, for example, a piece of equipment where they say there's a guard missing one day, and then they have the inspection the next day, and they say the guard's missing, and the next day it's missing, right? You're just doing the same thing over, and people get into the pencil whipping mentality because they're not getting fixed. Maybe you do that once a week, and you set up a safety work order, okay? The same inspection over and over that's doing nothing other than creating additional paperwork. And again, for those of you that are not doing this electronically yet, that's going to be a big eye opener when you see what Perviti has to offer. Okay, so corrective actions. How do we control? I mean, really, this is where the rubber hits the road. The control of the issues is what you found in your safety audit. And we're talking what? What do we mean? Corrective actions. And that should involve the managers, the supervisors, and you're going to have to set up priorities based on the level of the hazard. And really, we shouldn't say hazard anymore, right? We really want to talk about risks, because risk is the probability times the severity of the hazard, which actually will lead to how you prioritize this. So based on that, you determine your corrective actions, and you're going to have immediate actions, and then you're going to have long-term actions. Maybe it's filling in a pothole is immediate, or maybe it's a long-term that's costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. It just depends. So this is the type of information that we place in our files. We publish those results. We inform our supervisors. We inform our managers. We inform our employees of our findings and our recommendations. And remember, don't forget to acknowledge their part in it, okay? That's part of building the safety culture. The more they understand that they're a part of this, that are integral to the process, again, I can't emphasize enough, you've empowered them. You show them that you're implementing their recommendations through your corrective actions. And if it's something you can't do quickly, you tell them, hey, we're creating a capital acquisition request for this. And it's going to take us hundreds of thousands of dollars, but this is what we're doing, and this is the time frame that we're going to do. Okay. You can do, if you do that, you're talking about focusing on the recommendations. You're going to be spending the time, the money, and the resources based on the corrective actions on what you need to do to provide a safe workplace. It's not that difficult. Now, this ends my portion of the presentation. I do want to take one more quick poll. If we can bring that poll up on whether you're interested in additional information on a safety auditor course. I'd love to get that information from you. Again, we have that course in mid-February. And then I will go ahead and segue here after we get this poll completed to Pravidi's portion of the course. I appreciate your time. And now I'm going to hand it over to Eitan with Pravidi.
Thank you very much, Eric. My name is Eitan Shibi, and I am going to discuss Pravidi. I'm going to discuss how to automate, focusing on automating the audit slash inspection process from a technology point of view. So practically, how do you take all the great information that Eric discussed in the first half of this webinar and apply it into how can I actually do and perform audits? So first, to start with automating, building, and controlling. So the first step is automating your audits. And the automating component includes creation of the audit or the form or the checklist or the template. These are all synonyms. Creating it, how do you create it? What do you include in it? It's a lot more than just a question and an answer. You can include reference material, you can include text and PDFs and images that help the auditor have access to all this information. Remember, when you go on when you go with your mobile phone, your Android or your iOS or your tablet, you have access to a computer in front of you. So including in the form all this reference material will provide the auditor tremendous amount of information to conduct their audit more thoroughly and quickly and fast. Collecting the data, when we started back in 1999, we used a Palm Pilot, the green Palm Pilot with 1 megabyte of memory and a stylus, and people looked at us weird and said, what am I doing with this? Well, 95% of the people we talk to either use an Android phone or an iPhone. So for them, all the swiping and using all of these amazing, taking picture and electronic signatures and annotating and doodling and drawing and all these things are second nature. So very easy to include that, which is a part of the automating of your process. The B for build and expand. So once the first audit was conducted by you, this is where you learn, you improve on it, and you build into other areas, other business processes, other physical areas. You can stay on the high level of audit, the semi-annual or the annual or the audited inspection. You can drill down to more granular inspections and daily, weekly, monthly activities to use the same tool. So it really provides a huge value because you're already automating one part and you build and you expand on that. And the control part is reviewing your information, reviewing the results of the audit, improve your processes both from a safety point of view, from an effective point of view, and the audit process point of view, because you've conducted it electronically and you can learn what works, what doesn't work. Get feedback from the users that conduct the audit, not just for the results, and then distributing to management. Because it's all electronic, the distribution part, and I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to show some examples and talk about it, exceptionally easy and exceptionally powerful. So what is Previti? We started back, I mentioned, back in 1999. That's our 20th year, just over the 20th year. I can't believe we're in 2020. Previti is an easy-to-use system for automating audits, inspections, safety activities, compliance. It's really a wide range of things. And then when people start using it, they can focus on specific areas or they can expand it. So we started to focus from the outset on integrating technology and processes and simplifying it. Common sense, something we use all the time. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's not that common. Very important to enabling things to do smarter, not just to use computers and phones and tablets for the sake of technology, but to really improve what you're doing by using the tools that are available to you. We've been very lucky. We have quite a lot of customers. Go back, thank you. Quite a lot of customers, starting from large customers. NASA uses our product on a daily basis for the last 10 years, which is amazing. Our product is used to audit U.S. military bases. The last one we were audited with our tool was just in Japan, based on standardized checklists devised by the U.S. military. And then we go down all the way to, all dairy farms in Canada, all restaurants in the state of Louisiana, food, casinos, oil rigs. So we bring to the table experience with small implementations of a single user all the way to thousands of users that can use the same product and enjoy the same flexibility by literally automating. So on your screen now is an image of my phone. This is my Android phone. I apologize ahead of time if I'm going to get text or calls. It has happened before. That's an example of a few different checklists, audit checklists that we have created, just as an example. And the idea is to demonstrate, to show what you can do just with a phone. With an Android phone, it's a small screen. It's not even a large screen. So I'm going to specifically focus on a construction audit, which is based on the OSHA 1926. And I've created it. There are obviously details of you created on your construction site or on a building that you do, or in an area, or in a specific things like a conveyor belt or a crane. But this particular audit, and we'll talk about different types of audit, is topic-based. When you perform an audit, you do not need to answer 500 questions. You can look at the topics and identify the topics you want to answer, and you can just say, yep, I've checked everything in blasting and explosive, and that's okay, and company policy is okay, just by tapping on the screen. So I'm like doing a check mark. I don't need to go into all the details. Yeah, my cranes are okay, masonry and concrete is okay. But I want to show you example of all these other information that you can use on a mobile device. This is my phone. My phone is offline right now. I do not need to be connected to anything. And with Area Lift, first thing is I don't remember all the things I need to audit for an area lift. So I'm going to click on my information button, and there pops up all the text that was preloaded on my phone that explains to me what I need to look in area lifts. The idea of all this reference material, which I mentioned before, is to provide the auditor all this information at the tip of their fingerprint of their hand, and allow them to access it very quickly. In the same breath, I can access a picture or a PDF document with all the information that I need in order to conduct my audit. So this is an OSHA fact sheet that we've included in this particular question, where the auditor can audit and look at that. Now answering my area lift. So let's say that I don't think it's all right and I found a deficiency. So on a piece of paper, you'll say deficiency and you'll start writing. On an electronic form, automatically the secondary drop-down list of all the things that could go wrong appears. So we have programmed, and our users can change that, a secondary drop-down, and this one particular is mapped to OSHA 1926. What can go wrong with area lift? So it's a drop-down. It's faster to select rather than to type. It also standardizes it, so I can start creating pie charts and graphs and all kinds of things, because all of my auditors select the same thing from a list. It's not a typing. So when I select something, I can obviously type things. I can use speech to text because it's an Android phone or an iPhone, Siri or the copy of Siri, whatever is called an Android. I can take pictures, so I can click on the camera and take up to 5 pictures. I'm going to launch my camera. It launches. It takes a picture of my screen, which I just did. My screen is actually oriented a lot nicer because I'm projecting it. And now I have a picture attached to my question, up to 5, and I can open it and annotate on it. So I can, draw a little arrow. As I said, mine changes from portrait to landscape very nicely. So some of the things that our product automates and you control the checklist is what's included in the checklist. Is it question based? Is it topic based? Is it a decision tree? All the options that you have to conduct your audit. You can capture electronic signature. You can run a report. You can do everything on a mobile phone just by using your Android or your iPhone. Same as a tablet if you like a bigger screen. So some of the other things we've done, sign on screen. You log in, the system knows immediately who you are. So you don't have to say done by Joe, done by Dan, done by David. It knows who you are. It gives you unlimited checklist. You control them. It gives you date and timestamp. Eric mentioned pencil whipping. So we do date and timestamp on every item that the auditor answers. Plus, we put date and a timestamp on the picture itself. We stamp it. So when you look at the picture in your report or in your database or on your screen, you can see when it was taken. And you can also define your checklist in such a way where you'll mandate pictures for question 2, 7, and 85 if you have a lot of questions or a lot of items. So you can ensure that the auditor takes certain pictures that you want when you design the form. I mentioned speech to text. We have users that audit and or inspect large areas, part of a railway conveyor belt, and to identify where they are, they can scan a barcode or an RFID tag. So the system knows where you are on the conveyor belt rather than starting to type that you're on the left east corner 500 feet from the pole. And I mentioned the camera. Audit types, different kind of audits, and all role, doing it for 20 years, we've seen weird and wonderful things. So on a higher level, the management systems audit, where you audit your whole safety system or your whole organization, whether it's ISO, whether it's the 14001, 18001, etc. You go one level below, and the compliance audit, I showed you 1926 for construction, 1910 is for industrial. You can do NFPA, you can do fall protection. You can do a wide range of things from that level. Workplace safety, facility audits, hazard assessments, hybrids, customs. We have users that in specific part of the world, they inspect swimming pools. We never thought we would need to see inspection of swimming pools as part of an annual check of a facility. Institutional inspections or audit, and drilling down to safety inspection. So you can also use a tool like Previti to automate your inspection systems and then roll up the results as input to your audit. So you know what, and I'm going to show you in a minute about reports, what was done in terms of statistics. This is an example. We have a customer, commercial property management. They send people to facilities on a 3-day on-site audit once a year. Many items that they check, set up for different topics, the big audit. They used to use a combination of either paper, a spreadsheet on a laptop, and a camera, and going around and answering their questions and taking pictures, and then going, and when they finish their on-site audit, 10 to 20 hours for each 3-day inspection in order to compile the report, adding the pictures and checking and verifying and cross-referencing standards. We took this away. So the first immediate savings was 10 to 20 hours per audit. Then they also did it a lot faster because they just walk through and answer the questions. It's much simpler. You take the picture because it tells you need to take a picture. You record the results, and then the report was generated right away. So very easy to demonstrate saving in this environment. We have demonstrated savings in many environments because it's not just taking a piece of paper and giving you a PDF. It's automating the process, the corrective action process, the reporting process, the access online to that information. The understanding is, have I done what I needed to do? Reminders of all the things I haven't done. A big part of a system is not just to allow you to do what you need to do, but to change. Our big slogan that we use and is change your focus from the rule to the exception. The rule is being done. You don't need to spend time on it. Focus on the exception. And once you have all the details that you've collected, compiling summaries, pie charts, and graphs. The top left describes those secondary lists of deficiencies year to date, this year to date compared to last year to date. So you started looking at Eric mentioned 30,000 foot view. Look at the forest. Don't look at the trees. And now you can see exactly um, what's happening and what's going on. I'm going to shoot up a quick poll. So if you don't mind taking the time about what kind of do you conduct audits and you don't conduct audits. So if you can please fill it, that'll be appreciated. Thank you. Um, so what we've seen is in this webinar, actually, there's more people that are using some sort of software to automate their activity. Typically, a lot of people use paper. Some people, don't have a program to perform. They do, ad hoc um, solutions. But this is something we've seen again and again, and it's very easy for us to demonstrate the value, both if you use paper or even if you use some sort of another product that is not fully integrating, the mobility and the ability to just take a phone and do things out there. Very easy to demonstrate. Publishing the results. So remember, results could be, oh, I'm going to look at my audit and I'm going to compare how many inspections I've done throughout the year compared to how many deficiencies I found. And then I'm going to overview and look at my program. You can start including summaries and counts. A part of an effective safety program is disseminating information upwards, showing management what you do, showing management all the safety activities that you do, and that you manage the deficiencies and the things that are missed. If the system alerts you once a month, once every other month, of all the things that you missed that you didn't do, by the time you reach your audit, you will certainly know all the things that you've done, all the things that you missed, and where you are, even without conducting the audit yet. Many benefits. Complying with standards and regulation is pretty straightforward, but getting timely feedback about anything, about your failures, about your success, about where you are. So if you do have a third-party auditor, if you have an OSHA auditor or MSHA for mining or any other person coming and audits you, you're in a good position because you know where you are without running back and starting to pile all the papers or all the binders trying to find information. Simplifying activities is very important because you're doing the same thing on the phone. You don't have to learn new pieces of technology and complicated things. You reduce your error. You improve the accountability of the people, both the people who conduct the safety activities as well as the auditors, and reporting and analysis. And bottom line is you do improve safety, you do save time, save money and effort. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn back the microphone to Dan, who's going to conclude our webinar. Dan?
Thank you, Eitan. There are a lot of things that we can take away from the webinar, and we're going to cover a few questions. We have, fortunately, a few more minutes. Three of them that come to mind that were covered by both Eric and Eitan are documentation, and you can see that with an automated system like Previti, you can improve your documentation enormously. The second area that comes to mind is you can eliminate pencil whipping, which is a scourge of safety inspections and audits, and you can save an enormous amount of time. In the case study that Eitan mentioned, that company was able to save something in the order of 10 to 20 hours in developing a report, which is an enormous amount of time when you compound it, when you consider the number of reports that you have to do. Anyway, let's go through a few questions and see how many we can get through in the next 10 minutes or so. First question we're going to direct to Eric at NASP. Eric, can my audit be used against me if OSHA comes to my facility and requests this information?
Okay, Dan, so that's a good question. And unfortunately, yes, OSHA can request internal and external audits as part of its review process. So I think that's another reason why having this electronically is so important, because one of the things that OSHA looks for if they request this information is that maybe if you haven't completed everything on that audit, that you have begun the process, that you're showing what OSHA refers to as good faith effort. That might be a situation where you're having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on installing local disconnects on a piece of equipment from a lockout tagout perspective, or retrofitting guards. They want to see that you're in the process of doing something. If you have an audit that you haven't done anything and it's been sitting there for a year and nothing's been done on it, OSHA can cite and fine you for your own findings through an audit. So be very careful that you set up a corrective action plan and that you've documented it appropriately.
Okay, thank you, Eric. All right, the next question will direct to Eitan at Praviti. Can I record my audits and / or inspections electronically and present them to an auditor when required?
Thank you. The short answer is yes. Record keeping for both inspections and audits serves multiple purposes. A couple of the most important objectives would include complying with the laws, regulations, requirements, and corporate mandates. So, health and safety laws often require an employee to retain the records for a certain period of time, typically 7 years for many things, training records, meeting minutes, policies. And the second thing is to prove due diligence. So, records may be invaluable for proving that you are actually conducting and exercising the due diligence. So yes, an OSHA auditor or any auditor for that matter can come in and wants to and will look at the records. Some of them would like to see paper records. That means that the system, whatever electronic system you have, has to have the ability to produce them. They want it, you just click on a button and it prints them for them. It must be tamper-proof. So any system that you use must demonstrate that people can go in and modify and change audit results or inspection results without proper access. So not the inspector can't just go in after or the auditor and do that. And then it must be clear who recorded the audit and when and where at times for audit trails. So if this is done, then you're good and you can cover all the areas that an auditor might ask to see. Dan?
Okay, the next question again is directed towards Eric at NASP. My company does weekly inspections, but we don't really do any audits. Does this comply with OSHA regulations?
Well, that depends on the OSHA regulation itself. Some of the OSHA regulations require daily inspections. Some require weekly. If you're talking about cranes and derricks and hoists, or you're talking about your fall protection where you're supposed to inspect it before use, or maybe your forklift before use. So the inspection aspect, maybe it meets the compliance perspective of it, but bear in mind that the audit is supposed to help you determine whether your inspections are effective at actually reducing injuries in the workplace. So while you might technically comply with OSHA regulations, I want to make this point that OSHA is a bare minimum, right? We're looking at creating a safety culture whereby OSHA compliance is just the bottom of the rung, and we really want to get into a zero injury state. So again, and then some of the OSHA regulations do require the annual audit, like lockout, tagout, process safety management, some of those others. So you wouldn't be meeting the standards if that particular regulation required an annual review.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, this next one is for Praviti. What is the easiest way to construct an audit checklist?
Wow, the question to this answer, this question can be answered easily with a course or a book rather than a couple of minutes. But as an overview answer, there's some points that we found to be very useful when developing an audit checklist. And first, always start with define the objectives of the audit. Why are you conducting the audit, and what it is that you want to get out of this audit? That will walk you through the audit frequency and how often that audit need to be conducted. Some cases they need to be done, annually, semi-annually, or even monthly. Define your business or safety processes to be included in the audit. So what it is that you want to include, the more specific you are, the more focused the audit is, the better your results is. And for each of these processes, develop your checklist. There isn't one size that fits all in terms of checklist, but there's some basic information you want to include, specific instructions, focused, simple to understand, clear instructions, and if you need to put additional information, some reference material, as I mentioned, that's always very useful. Defining concrete and simple to follow answers so your auditor understands the item that they're auditing and understanding what it is that they're answering, not trying to guess at what it means. Yes, no, not applicable, pass, fail, deficiency. You can do numbers for rating, etc. Be concise. Questions should be concise. Include pictures and include space for notes. If you do that, the only other thing I would say is that you do one checklist, you build it, then you try to do it yourself, and then you go back and you adjust what it is that you need to adjust to improve it.
Okay, thank you, Eitan. Now, as a demonstration of efficiency, we're going to do our best to finish before the allotted time because we know how busy everybody is. So just to sum up, thank you all for attending, and we trust that the webinar has lived up to its title, The ABCs of Safety Auditing, Automate, Build, and Control. To recap, the NASP has many courses and programs for the safety professional, including the new auditing course, which is taking place again in mid-February. As you've also seen, Brevity has the tools to automate the auditing process so it's both faster and more effective. Shortly after the webinar, we'll be sending you out a questionnaire to do a quick evaluation, and we'd appreciate the feedback so we can improve the webinar the next time we conduct it. We'll do our best to answer any questions we didn't have time for, so feel free to contact us with any questions, comments, or expressions of interest. Also, let us know if you'd like a copy of the webinar to review or share with your colleagues, and we want to wish you all a safe and productive week. Thank you.